Welcome, gentlemen. Happy to have you on Owl Insights. Our guests today are Nicholas Tuback and Dan Weiner, and we wanted to talk today about your all's backgrounds and discuss why you started a life sciences company. So, Nicholas, maybe you can start us off and tell us a little bit about where you grew up and your background.
Sure. Yeah. Hi, Tim. Thanks for having us. So I'm from Berkeley, California, and I went to school at Berkeley where I studied molecular and cell biology and tech entrepreneurship. My main interest in adding that tech entrepreneurship onto the back end of molecular and cell biology is in learning some of the tools to run a business in the life sciences. My real interest is in developing therapeutics for neurological diseases. And that is a great segue into the reason why Dan and I should call him Dr. Weiner. I guess Dr. Weiner and I, although he and I talk all the time, started Propion. I was interested in first developing therapeutics for Alzheimer's disease. And I came across these molecules in the literature, which we now call Propion 1 and Propion 2, that have incredibly potent neuroprotective properties. And of course, because this is a nutraceutical company, I can't claim that they treat Alzheimer's disease, and I won't. But that's just how I sort of stumbled upon the relevance or how they're relevant in the literature. And Dan, we met through a mutual connection, and I'll sort of let him tell the rest of the story. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks again for having me as well. So I grew up in Toronto, Canada. I went to medical school at the University of Ottawa. I always wanted to be, a physician for the longest time. And then, going through medical school, while I really, enjoyed helping, people like one person at a time and their families, I thought I could do, contribute much more to the world through scientific research, especially health research, where when you make, discoveries, you have a chance to help not just, the one person or family you're dealing with, but, potentially, thousands of people at once. And so I got more interested in research as I went through medicine and residency. I then did residency in anatomical pathology at the University of Toronto. And by the end of that, I decided I wanted to spend more time in research. So I did a immunology fellowship at Stanford in the lab of Ed Engelman, who's the director of the blood center there. He studies mostly immunology and in tumors. But during that time, I have a twin brother as well. I don't know if Nicholas mentioned that to you, who also does research. And we started talking about ideas that we could do in, obesity, diabetes, and trying to really look at immune cells, how they contribute to these conditions, especially conditions where the immune system is not traditionally involved. And so we looked at, these immune cells called T cells and B cells and obesity and diabetes, and found some really amazing things during our postdoc. And I built on some of those during my initial career as an assistant professor at the University of Toronto before moving to the Buck Institute and the USC affiliation, where I am now as an associate professor. So I've taken some of the stuff we've learned in obesity, diabetes, and the immune system. Particularly, we've mapped out how immune cells contribute to these diseases through their function inside the different tissues in your body. So, during obesity, for example, as people gain weight, the fat in their body, this leads to immune cells coming into the fat, and that causes inflammation and fat. And we mapped out some of the initial or earliest types of at least adaptive immune cells, which are T and B cells of the immune system in there. However, at the same time, we also noticed that the immune cells, not just in your fat or in other tissues, but the immune cells living in your gut, especially like, in the colon we worked at, these also changed quite significantly during obesity. And that's sort of how I got interested in this gut immune system connection. And so when Nicholas approached me a couple of years back about this idea of looking at metabolites that are potentially produced by gut bacteria, I was like, this is great. I mean, we have done work mapping out immune cells in the intestine, and the immune cells interface with the gut bacteria in there. And so here is an undergrad student from Berkeley with this incredible idea in an area which my lab was very interested in. And so that's kind of how we kicked off and got started.
Well, that's incredible. So this really pulls at a thread, which I think is really fascinating about the interaction of really the human ecosystem. So the gut biome and how it really drives, I don't know, the human condition, the health of the people. Can you peel the onion a little bit about, we have, really this ecosystem of third parties in our gut, and talk about that a little bit?
Sure. I mean, I can mention a few things, and if Nicholas wants to add something after, he can. But so the immune system in your intestine is the largest immune system in the body, and it interfaces with the microbiome. There's trillions of microbes in the body, probably in the thousands of species right now in there. And basically, what happens is, when you're born, you inherit some of this, microbiome. I mean, especially if it's through like a vaginal delivery through the delivery process. Also interface some of it with the environment, the types of foods you eat. And usually when you're very young, this microbiome is highly diverse. But as you get older, especially in a Western civilization, where your diet, where the typical Western diet becomes, kind of restricted, right? And so, like, a lot of people eat, the typical things like, high in saturated fat, processed foods, sugars. This would be like, a hamburger, fries, for example, kind of meal happening too frequently. So that takes a toll on your gut microbiome. The microbiome then kind of adapts to this diet and becomes more restrictive as well. And so what happens is the diversity in your microbiome, even though it started out really diverse in your young age, it's shaped by this diet and other environmental factors as well. And ultimately, it becomes more or more restrictive or less diverse as you age. And what people see in science, especially in people that have obesity, diabetes, or chronic diseases of aging, this reduction in the diversity of the microbiome also impacts the types of products that these microbes produce. These metabolic products, we call them metabolites. And so the change in the metabolites and then these bacteria, they have a profound effect on the body. Now, there's a number of things that also happen. As your microbes become less diverse and more adept at, processing sugars and fats, the types of bacteria also carry with them specific toxins or features associated with them that can also cause inflammation throughout the body and also impact on the integrity of the gut barrier. And so it's a combination of these things, these metabolites, the interface with the immune system, and the impact on the intestinal barrier. These things act in concert to contribute to chronic diseases. I mean, they're not the only thing that drives chronic disease, but certainly they have an important role in it.
So to ask maybe a simplifying question, obviously food's the input, metabolites are the output of these microorganisms. Is that accurate?
That's right. Just as our bodies need to, metabolize foods into, energy and building blocks and things to help us sustain life, the bacteria living in your intestine, living on your skin, living in your lungs, these things also need food and nutrition. And so these bacteria will process some of the dietary ingredients as you eat them. And then they take these foods and use them for their own metabolism and then pump out metabolites. In some cases, these metabolites are really good. Like, so if you eat a lot of, healthy food like fibers, these bacteria can metabolize them into, some types of metabolites called short chain fatty acids. I mean, you might have heard of them. They've been linked to a number of benefits. They provide an energy source to the intestine. They can dampen inflammation within the intestine. However, sometimes these bacteria can produce, metabolites that aren't so healthy. You might have heard of studies in the past that have linked to having too much red meat to specific metabolites that can cause heart disease, for example. And so the list goes on. It's a balance. I mean, the microbes of what you take in, how it shapes the type of bacteria in there, and what they pump out. All of these interface with human health and disease,
So
of course.
so what I'm taking away from this conversation is a diverse gut microbiome is beneficial. We just start out with that. You want to maintain that. And I think what I've gotten from our conversations is you can kind of thumb the scale on favoring maybe the more beneficial biome with ingredients, for lack of a better term, that complement just the normal natural diet that we have. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I
Exactly.
mean, one
So,
of the
go ahead,
the
Nicholas. Yeah.
main anti-aging tip that I give to everybody now that I've been doing this for a couple of years, I get friends and family and random people that I meet. When I tell them about my work, they ask, okay, what's the number one thing that I can do to stay younger for longer? And in the simplest of terms, high fiber diet. A high fiber diet is, in my opinion, the best way to maintain diverse gut microbiota. And that's one of the best ways to stay healthy.
And what's an example of I guess good fiber?
I eat a lot of cruciferous vegetables like broccoli, leafy greens, stemmy greens. Dan can expand on the list.
Yeah, so there's, yeah, I just wanted to kind of bring up another point. I mean, I'll talk about the fiber in a minute, but just another point, going back to the diversity you mentioned. And so it's not just the foods that you eat that alter the diversity of the diet, but it's also environmental exposure. So, for
Hmm.
example, and this could start, really, really young. So, say you were born as a cesarean section instead of a vaginal birth. That could alter the microbiome. A big thing, especially earlier in age, is antibiotics. So if someone takes, has frequent ear infections as a child and they're on, 6, 7 courses of antibiotics in their young age, that's going to have a marked effect on shaping your microbiome. And some people even think that certain types of antibiotics can actually contribute to obesity in the future, especially when given young. Now, in terms of the fiber, I mean, yeah, so there's two broad types of fiber, the way I think of it. There's insoluble fiber, and this is kind of food which I consider just as kind of, roughage. It just kind of passes through your system and is not really acted on or metabolized too much. And then there's the soluble fiber. Soluble fiber are these carbohydrates that are kind of broken down by the gut bacteria into other metabolites. And some of those are these short chain fatty acids that I mentioned. And so soluble fiber you get in a number of foods, as Nicholas mentioned, like some of the cruciferous vegetables, things like apples, bananas. Usually if you look at an ingredient label, they'll start listing now, if I'm not mistaken, how much, in terms of fiber, they'll break it down to how much of it is soluble. And it's that soluble fiber that kind of feeds your bacteria more than the insoluble fiber, but you do need a combination of both of them.
So for the soluble fiber, it is does it matter whether it's cooked or not?
That's an interesting question. I would, I believe there have been studies looking at, and I'm going to have to look into this a little bit more, but I believe there have been studies which have looked at the effects of cooking on fiber. I know the method by which you cook foods does make a difference, maybe not just with fiber, because, for example, if you rapidly heat some foods up, especially certain carbohydrates, which might have contained fiber, but if you heat up certain foods, at high temperatures or really quickly, you can generate a lot of, potentially dangerous products. The classical example would be something like acrylamide. So, acrylamide is something that you might find in, pastries, or I think potato chips is probably, the classic example of acrylamide. You heat up the carbohydrates in potatoes really fast and in oil, and then boom, you get these compounds called acrylamides, and they've been linked, at least associating with types of cancers. I don't know if they've actually shown it's causative yet, but certainly I know it's been associated with certain types of cancer because acrylamide can act as a carcinogen. Fibers, I imagine, I'm not quite sure. I have to look more into that actually, but I imagine that if you cook apples, some of the soluble fiber, ingredient in there is still probably maintained. I know if you cook something like broccoli, you'll still, especially if you microwave it, some of the vitamins and nutrient content reduces, especially like some of the vitamins in there that may be less stable to acute heating, especially water heating inside, or just, directly heating really quickly, which is why a lot of people say when you cook vegetables, it's better to steam them, and to do it slowly rather than to kind of nuke something really fast in the microwave where you might kind of reduce nutrient content. But I'd have to double check more. I imagine the fiber content, which is kind of, it might be, maintained better than some of the vitamins through these processes.
And
Would you have a sense
every
of
time Dan talks, I learn something.
that's
Oh.
awesome. And so would you have a thought about steaming versus stir fry?
I would think that steaming would be better than stir frying. I mean, the other thing that happens when you stir fry stuff, especially in, with oils and sugars, you can make these things called advanced glycation products on them. And then these things can potentially, cause, rapid sugar spikes in your body as well. And so steaming, I mean, my understanding is that steaming food is probably one of the safest or best ways to cook them. And also probably helps most with maintaining nutrient quality inside the food.
Would chopping it raw in a salad be optimal, or do you think there's much difference between that and steaming?
Oh, I would imagine that, chopping them, eating raw, you're maintaining the complete nutrient content, so nothing is lost to the heat. And and there's types of ways of cooking food which are absolutely known to be probably the worst would be something like a lot of people love barbecues. I mean, who doesn't? But barbecues, for example, when you the act of charring food, especially if you're charring like meats, that's also producing a lot of potentially carcinogenic molecules in there. Let's look at the tarred stuff like on or the charred stuff like on a hamburger, for example. Like that stuff is like eating probably like a spoonful of carcinogens if you get a hamburger completely charred over well done, for example.
I'll also add this though. One of the secrets to a long life is being happy. So if you need to eat a hamburger sometimes, I would hazard that that's okay too. Yeah.
Good insight. So let's come back full circle. So the purpose of the propion molecules, you got a multi-path or a multi-phased approach to what you want to bring to market. Talk first about this first phased approach, which, as I've interpreted as a layman, I've simplified it as this is food for the good bacteria, and this is not so much for us; it's for our little friends. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So our first product, which we're calling Propion Blend, is a proprietary combination of ingredients that feed particular bacteria in your gut microbiome the building blocks that they need to assemble anti-aging, longevity promoting gut microbiome metabolites. So all of that to say, these ingredients give those bacteria what they need to excrete these essential bioregulatory molecules that we as a company call Propion 1 and Propion 2. And Dan can talk more about the way that the ingredients are combined to create that effect in the Propion blend and why those postbiotics that we call Propion 1 and Propion 2 are so important for human health.
Now, before we get into that, just to step back from just wrap my own brain around this. How do we maybe bring that diverse ecosystem back to our gut? Like, if we lose it after having, maybe a bad diet, how do we bring that diversification back? I know this is part of that process, but writ large, is that possible?
Yeah, it's been shown that eating a healthy diet can actually restore bacterial diversity very quickly.
Okay, so those bacteria just don't go away. They just happen to be the minority.
Yeah, they shrink down. I mean, some will disappear. I mean, with antibiotics, but usually with diets, what happens is, so say you're eating like high saturated fat, sugar, or processed foods for a week. What happens is the bacteria that can metabolize those will transiently expand, and the ones that are metabolizing or eating like red peppers or yellow peppers or whatnot will shrink down. And so the goal is with eating a diverse diet rich in fruits and vegetables is to try to keep those good bacteria up in there so that you can benefit from the types of metabolites that they produce.
Do you have to do something explicit to reintroduce certain bacteria if you've not had them?
I mean, some people. I mean, then this kind of goes to the argument of the probiotic versus prebiotic route, where some people think that when you've got low levels of good bacteria in your system, let's just give them back as a
Yeah.
probiotic, and some people think let's expand them naturally by giving them the foods and the precursors that they need to sustain their metabolism so that they can divide and replenish themselves. I think it's probably a lot more complicated than we understand. And there's probably feedbacks, these bacteria live in something called a niche in the intestine, and there's probably a microenvironment of nutrients in competition between bacterial species in there. And there's also something called quorum sensing, where they can sense the amounts and numbers of them in there. And so it's probably much more, complicated than we're making it seem. But I imagine that, you can help you can help expand by your, bacteria of the types you want by eating the foods that they metabolize. And that's kind of one of the things that we're trying to do with our Propion blend product. Expanding some types of good bacteria by giving them the food they need, and then by having more of these bacteria in there, you start making these beneficial metabolites that combat things like obesity, diabetes, and even aging itself.
That's great. Okay, I derailed that with my question. Nicholas, you want to get us kind of back on track with what you were thinking about the process and what the benefits of using the blend is?
So I'd like Dan to explain a little bit about what the ingredients are in Propion blend, how they act synergistically, and what the endpoints are of using the product. I mean, I think that would be a helpful next step.
Okay, so, basically, as I mentioned, as people get older or as people start developing, chronic diseases like, obesity, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, the gut bacteria in your system, it starts to shrink. And, as we mentioned, these types of, good bacteria start to dwindle away and are replaced by bacteria that like to metabolize kind of, more harmful things to the body. And so the what we do with this Propion blend shake, we think we've made, an ultimate shake to benefit certain types of bacteria that metabolize a specific amino acid. I don't know, Nicholas, how much detail you want me to give, but we're kind of honing in on one specific amino acid metabolism pathway that is known to pump out many different types of beneficial metabolites. And so the way the shake is designed, and it's designed through science, it's not just kind of a random, a random combination of good ingredients that have been linked to, pro health, and you put them all together randomly and say, oh, we've got an ultimate product here. We've got like 10 different antioxidants or whatever. The shake is designed by, diverting metabolism inside the gut bacteria, especially to boost the levels of beneficial bacteria to produce a couple of metabolites that have been known to extend health span and also combat things like obesity, diabetes. And so what I can say, I guess, is most of the shake, it's a combination of amino acids, a protein carrier, specific antioxidant super fruits, and these all act in synergy. So what we do is we have the protein in the shake acts as a carrier, which will carry, the specific amino acids we have in extra amounts, which that will then make its way down to the bacteria. The protein then releases these amino acids slowly. One amino acid acts as a precursor that the bacteria will gobble up. Another amino acid forms a byproduct that will block an enzyme that will normally degrade the amino acid that we want, and will actually like divert it into one specific beneficial pathway in the bacteria. The superfoods and the antioxidants, they provide support. They prevent our metabolites from oxidizing, and all of this acts in synergy to raise levels of the beneficial metabolites that we want.
So it
It's been
really
shown
is
in,
like
yeah, go ahead.
if you're a visual person, it really is like a
Yeah.
funnel. Like we start with the ingredients and they're all there to act in concert to funnel down into creating these functional postbiotics.
Great.
Yeah, so
And
go ahead.
no, I'm sorry, Dan. Let you go.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt you.
No, I was just going to say that basically, like with this blend, we can raise the level of the desired, metabolites of interest, these good beneficial metabolites that have been linked to healthy aging by about twofold in people over 60, where the product was tested in Europe. And basically, as you get older, the level of these beneficial metabolites fall in half. And with our baseline blend product, we can raise it twofold. Nicholas and I, we can talk later about how we were improving on this shake as well to potentially raise them higher than normal levels, but we can definitely replenish them to normal, healthy levels.
And what's your vision for your target audience for this shake?
That's a great question. When I talk to my grandparents, they say as you get older, you just have more and more gastrointestinal issues. And also cognitively slow down. You an anxiety strikes you that your health is declining.
Right.
I think that's also, I think stress actually about aging does sometimes drive the aging process as well, because it becomes this sort of reinforcing cycle where that becomes an acute reality for you, which you're aware of. And then if you're not doing everything you can, or if you don't have the proper tools, then it can become very defeating. And I think our vision for our target audience, I mean, the blend is really targeted to people over 40, and it is to improve improve their metabolic health, supply their body with neuroprotective molecules, which are what these postbiotics are, as well as gut microbiome enhancing molecules, potentially reduce blood sugar, potentially increase GLP-1, and overall enhance your sense of vitality and that you are really in control of your aging process. I think is also an important thing that we don't talk about enough.
Great. And is this something that, you yourself would look to take, but it's just kind of more of a health thing, but maybe not as effective? I mean,
what do you mean by effective or not as effective?
well, I guess my impression is maybe your body does a better job.
Because I'm younger?
Yes, correct.
Yeah. There's some switches in aging where, like, truly after you pass a certain point, your body flips a switch, and after that, an entirely distinct age-dependent process is activated or inactivated. I like to think of that as the exception for aging, and more view getting older biologically as a process that accelerates with time, but starts very early on. I mean, it starts
Okay.
as soon as your body is done growing, because, and this is the explanation that I use for lay people, as soon as your body is done growing, the only thing it has left is to maintain its borders, essentially.
Right.
So it's no longer building on things. It can't just toss things out and get rid of what's broken and replace it. It's really just focused on, like, defending itself and trying to keep the facade up. And so I absolutely want to take this product. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Dan and I have been taking the samples. We've used all of the flavoring samples that we've gotten from the manufacturer, and it's something that I plan on adhering to rigorously, right? Every day taking Propion Blend, because I think it's one of the number one things that I can do after a good diet, exercise, drinking lots of water, not too much sun exposure. After those things, I think it's one of the number one things that I could do to take control of my aging process.
Great.
Yeah,
And
I'm just going to say, Tim, one of the things, as Nicholas said, I've been taking the product too, and one thing it does not do, it does not regrow hair, as you can see. But yeah, one of the things that I also wanted to mention is that, we consider this product as something a part of, a complete, healthy aging regimen. And so, diet is important. The types of food that goes in, is amongst the most important things you could do for aging. But as Nicholas alluded to, it's part of a regimen. And so, probably the thing people ask me all the time, like, what do I do? Like, what are things you can do to improve aging? And I think taking, something like Propion Blend to help promote healthy aging is just one thing. I mean, other things would be like exercise, as Nicholas said. Like, you have to at least maybe walk 20 to 30 minutes a day. Like, you have to move. Like, you can't be a stage. The humans were designed to move as into age rather than just sit around all day. Another thing would be, try to get, 7 or 8 hours of sleep a night. Another thing would be, have a hobby, socialize. I know there was this a great show that I watched on Netflix on Blue Zones, and if you look at, where the longest living people are, they all give their little tidbits of wisdom, and these are all the kind of things that I'm mentioning. Try to reduce stress. eating healthy food, exercise, things like that, have a hobby. And of course, diet. I mean, I think diet and exercise are probably the two most important aspects into healthy aging. And that's one of the things that excited me about Propion Blend is that we have a new product in the dietary space, which is not like anything that's been, released before with healthy aging. And that's kind of, you asked at the beginning what got me excited about Propion. And for me, it's the chance to put a new product on the market, something which has not been done before. The dietary pathway that we're looking at is not, it's not resveratrol, it's not, AKG, ketone bodies, NAD with slash NR slash NMN. This is something new and exciting, and it can be combined, with people's existing anti-aging regimens and dietary factors. So that's one thing which I got excited about that, and I wanted to kind of add that into the conversation.
I'll also
I,
throw something in, which is that one of the reasons that I'm interested in my gut microbiome, I think, and in maintaining the integrity of my gut barrier is for youthful appearance. Like just your gut is linked to your skin. It's linked to, I mean, every organ. And so by sometimes I'm just too busy to think about every single thing that I can do for my health, right? Sometimes I just want to grab a hamburger, or I don't have time to cook at home, all sorts of things that just sort of get in the way. I think in an ideal world, we would all be able to do 100%. But focusing on gut inflammation also to me seems like a fundamental mechanism of action. I think that gives me a lot of relief in terms of what I can do for myself easily with this product. Yeah.
yeah, I think it's incredibly helpful. I mean, I know talking with both of you, it's really expanded my understanding of, food is medicine, so healthy food is obviously best for us, but that there's also, our friends and they have a different food need. And so that there's actually, just taking a vitamin, just understanding that there's more than just the absolute needs of
Yeah,
my cells, that,
exactly.
there's a whole additional set of critters that have their own food needs that feed into my own benefit. We've also talked about, there's a bigger vision for Propion and there's follow-on products. Do you want to talk about that at all? Is that
Yeah, yeah. We'd love to. I mean, what we're really interested in here is the functional postbiotics that we call Propion 1 and Propion 2. And the data around these molecules is so profound that I cannot talk about it without fear of the FDA coming and finding me, basically. So I'm sort of trying to figure out how to walk that high wire, but let's just say the verdict is in on these being some of the number one bioregulatory molecules that your body creates to maintain its own health. So and levels also decline as you age and as a result of the modern diet. And so I guess my jumping point with that is there's the sky is the limit with a technology that really profoundly impacts human health. And the market is unlimited. I think, you make all of your money, or as you make money, what do you really want to spend it on? You want to spend it on fun and health are
right?
like the two main things, right? Like feeling good and having a good time. And so with these molecules, the way they interact with not just the gut microbiome, they also cross the cell membrane into the mitochondria, where they stabilize what's called the electron transport chain to reduce free electrons as they escape the electron transport chain, to create reactive oxygen species in your mitochondria, which reduces the functional lifespan of your mitochondria, leads to cell death, leads to all types of bad health conditions. That means skincare. That's like one of the first things that comes to mind is a really potent mitochondrial antioxidant is eventually we're going to go down the skincare route where we are adding this functional ingredient to skin creams or partnering with skincare companies and licensing our brand name and some type of formulation around the technology to incorporate into skin products. We've talked about incorporating the molecules or packaging Propion blend, which is the precursors to the molecules, into pet food. My dog recently passed away, and I actually was quite sad that I didn't get the chance to give him Propion earlier, because I think that would have actually improved his kidney function and improved his heart function, just overall slowed his aging. And I know so many people feel the same way about their pets, right? A couple of people have encouraged us, like, have you ever thought about just only going into pet food? Because the market is massive. So there are a lot of different ways that we're planning to expand as a company. Actually, third as well into pharmaceuticals, where we will be making disease claims around analogs of these molecules that are not found anywhere in nature and therefore can be patented and turned into drugs to treat diseases.
Got it. Okay, so there's a path of complexity, and we've got a simple path now with a lot less regulatory restrictions.
So, like, one of the slides in our pitch deck, for example, is like, this is not a supplement company. We are not a marketing scheme. We are not a supplement company. We're not just a brand. This is a deep tech company with consumer products and goods as a market entry point. That's how I would describe it.
That's great. Well, this has been hugely insightful for me, and I think our audience. How is best for people to follow up with you or to learn more? Where would we direct people?
Sure. Well, we are about to launch pre-sales of our Propion blend product next Friday. So you'll be able to go at that time, and the website is just in its final phases of being built, but you'll be able to go to propion.com, and that's propion.com to pre-order the product. We'll only have 1,000 bottles available. So I know there are already a lot of people who have lined up on our pre-sale lists. So if you're interested in getting access early on, I would go there right away.
That's great. Yeah, we'll publish this in the next 24 hours or so, and I'll make sure I put that in the show notes. Well, this has been incredibly insightful, like I said. And are there any additional thoughts from either one of you want to leave us with?
I'll leave you with this. We as a company aren't going to cure your aging, but we did not start Propion because we wanted to make a buck off of a consumer product. We started it because we believe the products that we are developing can profoundly impact our own aging process. And we plan to take the products that we're making, because it's not just a product, it's actually a technology. And it's a technology that applies to everyone, whether you're older, whether you're younger, should make an impact, should make a difference in your life. Even if you don't feel it right away, your cells feel the difference before you do.
That's awesome. Dan, anything else?
Yeah, well, as I said, I started my career as a medical doctor. I'm now a scientist. I've spent time doing both as a clinician scientist. And, one of the goals, I've had is to try to make a difference in the lives of many people. And I think this product has a chance to doing so.
That's awesome. Well, this has been a great honor to hear about this, and we're excited to see where this story goes. Thank you, gentlemen.
All right. Thank you very much, Sam.